guest because she flew in from Scotland, and maybe it's best you introduce yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Arno. My name is Dr. Catherine McCall. I am the president of the European Foundation for Doing Philosophy with Children, in schools, out of schools, and young people, not just little ones. This has been my life's work. We are a stichting, a charity, so we're here volunteering our time. And I really wanted to thank Professor Nussbaum, whom I actually met in Edinburgh quite a long time ago. There were a room of maybe 100 philosophers, of whom about 93 were men. And there were maybe 5 or 6 of us women philosophers in the given lectures. I just thought I'd remind her. But it's getting better now. There are more women philosophers. And I have kind of a double question, if that's okay. Firstly, I wanted to ask you that do you agree with us that philosophizing and encouraging philosophical reasoning and dialogue with children and teenagers and bank managers and professors is one avenue towards achieving the rescue of humanity in the way that you have described for us? And secondly, I have another question. Do you think, as I do, that actually philosophers have a special responsibility in this? More even than some of the other humanities, because this is foundational to what we are and do. And I've always admired your, right from the fragility of goodness, your call for philosophers to be involved, to change the world, to do something. And I think it's becoming more and more necessary. And certainly our experience, my experience, is that it's actually needed more now than 30 years ago when I started, that children have an impoverished imagination. They cannot concentrate, they cannot listen, they cannot reason. They just, they might be perfectly happy, but they're fidgeting and they're elsewhere and they cannot think. And it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And we really need something like philosophy for children and philosophers to get involved in it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Can you all hear me? I don't know. This is
Sorry,
not.
sorry, I have
Wait a minute.
No, it's my fault, sorry. It's on now.
Oh, it's on now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, first, thank you very much. What she doesn't know about the Gifford history, which I found out when I agreed to give them, was that the women who had previously given them had died very soon after giving them.
The curse.
Both Hannah Arendt and Iris Murdoch.
Iris Murdoch, yeah.
Yeah, and well, I think partly it was they waited until they were
Too
so old to invite them, but it wasn't just that, because Hannah Arendt was not that old when she died. Anyway, so I didn't, I was sort of trembling in I was trembling anyway because it was so cold there, but I was trembling in my shoes, but I have survived, so that's good. Yeah, no, I think this is terribly important what you say. And in the book I talk about the importance of teaching, of doing philosophy with children, and I focus on Matthew Lipman, who has done some wonderful work in the US on this. But I now know that there are other people in other countries, and of course your whole association I'd like to know much more about, who are working along these lines. And I've now just heard over lunch about schools here where every teacher has to learn this ability, and that's not spreading, but at least those schools, 5 schools I think, are still doing it. I think that philosophers, first of all, it is terribly important. And it's more important than ever because of the internet. And the internet really does discourage critical thinking, because it encourages you to blurt out whatever you think without any accountability, and with this culture of constant insult and hype and offensiveness. So I think as children spend more and more time in that world, the philosophy is more needed than ever. But then I also think it really is philosophers who have the primary responsibility. I said in Cultivating Humanity, just talking about the teaching of critical thinking in colleges and universities, that yes, it could be done in the other humanities, but philosophers have a special disciplinary connection to this. They do it unusually well. But the fact is, not one of them in America, except for Lippmann, and I don't know what he's doing now, has been devoting themselves to this issue of children. And I think it's terrible. I think the problem is that a field of applied ethics will develop, and good young people will go into it only if they see jobs at the other end. So bioethics has mushroomed, and it's big. So, because people know that hospitals are hiring bioethics. But why did they hire them? Because some people were willing first to take the risk and get in there and then show people the value of that. So I think it really has to be done. Now, I'm not sure that in the US it will catch on, because the minute that it would start in the public schools, you would have objections from religious parents. And they would say, this is the creed of secular humanism. Not every religion is, of course, opposed to it. Roman Catholics and indeed the Dutch Reform colleges and universities in America are quite supportive of teaching philosophy, but Baptists and Mormons are not. And they use this demonization rhetoric of secular humanism. So I don't know what would happen if philosophy was taught in the public schools. They had a movement called values clarification, which was quasi-philosophical. I don't think it was that good, but it was, you know, got into big hot water. But anyway, I think in Europe the climate is more favorable, and it would be probably important to just go ahead and for young philosophers to get involved. And I really do think that this is terribly important. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Great. I forgot to ask you whether you would want to respond to Professor Dolan's.
Oh, well, I guess what I...
Maybe